One of the most striking of which would be the pushback on the part of gamers. It is a pushback against a corrupt gaming press, and believe me when I say they are corrupt, that is exactly what they are. When this first started coming to light, they originally tried silence. They simply sought to ignore it and hoped that it went away, but it didn't. When that failed, they moved on to censorship which we can show, which evidence exists of, and yet that did not work. It just spread it even further, thanks to the Streisand effect. When censorship failed, they moved on to what they're doing now, which is mockery and attacking. And it will fail just like the past two attempts did. What they are not taking into account is people have had enough. And a prime example of that is the fact that we're even still talking about this. That we are on day 14 with a fucking hashtag Gamergate. That we are on day 14 with people in the movie industry, the television industry, the fucking music industry commenting on this. We are on day 14 where websites have some of the largest threads in their fucking history dedicated to this very thing. It is not going away, it is not diminishing, and it is not dying. And that speaks volumes to what is happening, because the internet is a place where things happen in quick succession. You are lucky if you can keep the internet's attention for a day, let alone 2 entire weeks. And yet, still, the gaming media, the gaming press, these supposed so-called journalists, are trying to act as if there's nothing here, that there's no corruption, that nothing needs to be addressed, or that anything that has been addressed as a result of the sustained pressure is not a big deal. That it's really not as big as you think. There's no conspiracy, there's no collusion. You're all just deluding yourselves and thinking that things are taking place and they're not really happening. But we, the game journalists, we have your best interest in mind, so just shut the fuck up and we'll tell you what to think. Now, it's been hard to keep track of all this because so much shit has come to light. So many different pieces of evidence and links and connections between different individuals because, I'll say this right out front, I think perhaps the biggest fault, outside of the blatant fucking corruption, would be the arrogance of these people. The gaming journalists that exist are some of the most smug, arrogant fucking people you will ever meet. But that works to our benefit. They think they can't be held accountable. They think that their faults and failures don't need to be addressed, and they are arrogant and defiant in their behavior. And because of that, they have dragged their asses across social media to such an extent that massive amounts of connections and evidence just sits there. Now, because of the scope of things that have taken place, I want to scale it back. I want to ask a simple question. Before all of this happened, who would you have listed if I'd said, name me a reputable game journalist or a website that you trust? Well, I think most people would have answered Forbes, and I think most people would have said Eric Kane. He's somebody who people looked up to. He's somebody that we held as an example of somebody who we thought had our best interest in mind, even if we disagreed with him, because we had seen his ethical standards and practice. Now, Forbes, and the people I'm going to be talking about, have not in any way been connected to any of this. None of their names have been brought up. None of them have ever been shown to have been in collusion with anybody else. It's just a site with two guys talking about this. But I think it speaks to an issue of the disconnect between them and us, between the gaming media and the actual consumer. Now, the first article we're going to look at is by Paul Tassi. It's called The Truth About Video Game Journalism, and it was published on August 22nd, so roughly a week from when the blog post first went up. Now, in his article, he mentions that there's a scandal going on, but he's not going to mention anybody by name. He then further goes on to explain that this isn't really an issue, that games journalism is fairly mundane, that they're not going to jump on a dog pile to slander an innocent woman, and that he feels uncomfortable calling himself a gamer now because of the toxic mentality of these people, of gamers that are curious about this, that want this to be addressed, because the bias is on our part and not the gaming press's part. It's our fault, not theirs. And while this article tries to come off as neutral and objective, it's quite clear it's not. Now, Tassi, as I said, he doesn't address any of the concerns. Instead, he says that she's innocent, and that's how he addresses it. He doesn't look into any of the evidence or any of the allegations. He doesn't want to jump on that dog pile. Now, you could look at this and say, all right, well, maybe that's his opinion. But then look what he writes on Twitter directly after publishing this. This is from August 23rd, from Paul Tassi on his Twitter account. All this, but doesn't this raise questions talk, reminds me of people being mad at the media for failing to prove Obama is a Muslim. If I had to guess, I'd say there's some overlap in those crowds. Now, that's ironic coming from Paul Tassi, because in his article he states, ideally, we'd like to do so without being insulted. He doesn't want to be insulted as a gaming journalist. He's just trying to do his job. Even though he's going to spin a narrative that anybody questioning this is toxic, and that the woman in question, who he won't name, is innocent and being dogpiled on by horrible individuals. Apparently those that think Obama is a Muslim. So it really throws the objective nature of his article out the fucking window. That's not really journalism. There's no investigation taking place. You're not addressing anything. You're just putting up a smokescreen. It's an article that doesn't talk about anything. But it's not Paul Tassi we're interested in, is it? It's Eric Kane. That's the guy we look to. That's the guy that's held up as the example, as the fucking example of what game journalism should be. He's the guy we trust. So let's take a look at his article. It was Sex, Lies, and Video Games, and it was published on August 26th, so it's 4 days after Tassi's was put up. Now, while Kane's article does go slightly farther than Tassi's did, again, it's another non-piece. There's no real investigation taking place. It says there was a scandal, it mentions some partial details, but that's about it. And instead, it veers off. It veers off to talk about something he says echoes Jim Sterling's earlier statements about how journalists have a tough job and maybe it's hard to keep relationships separated, but let's not go into any specific detail. He even outright states in his third paragraph, let's gloss over the details. Then going on to further state, I've done the research. I've followed the various threads on the various forums, listened to the YouTube videos, seen all those little immigrant sleuth pics. And while a deeper look at the nature of the media industry relationship is warranted, this affair only serves as a leaping off point, not as the story itself. That is a sentiment we've heard echoed repeatedly since this began. They will not talk about this. They refuse to talk about this. And again, this is a publication that's not connected to it. And yet, it presents an image of a gaming press that will not keep its house in order. It won't talk about the objective failures of other game journalists. They won't do that. You can't talk about that. That's not acceptable. It's ironic that his article's talking about the closeness of relationships when it demonstrates the thing he's talking about by refusing to address the allegations made in relation to the scandal. And that is what it is. We're talking about a scandal related to relationships between indie developers, Zoe Quinn, and people in the gaming press. It was the catalyst for what has set everything else off. You could no more remove Zoe Quinn from corruption in game journalism than you could remove Richard Nixon and Watergate from corruption in politics. It is the focal point, it is the starting point, it is the catalyst. By refusing to address it, you're hand-waving us off. Now, one of the things I find concerning about this is that very statement, I've done the research. What does that mean? What do you mean you've done the research? You're a journalist. If you're a journalist, this is my understanding of what a journalist does. They investigate. They do interviews. They make phone calls. They look into possible connections, financially or otherwise. They actually get out and do the legwork. Watching YouTube videos and reading forum threads is not journalism. That's what bloggers do. That's what I do. That's what everybody on the fucking internet does. Journalists take it a step further by investigating and looking into the allegations, possible statements or connections. They do the legwork. So I find it disconcerting that that's your research and that then you go off and to talk about these vague things without addressing the specifics. Again, just like Tassi did. Now, later on in the article, you state, under this whole social justice warrior thing is a mess, just a complete mess. A fairly substantial set of gamers is absolutely obsessed with the so-called SJW, the White Knights of Games Media. And you talk about how you don't really understand that. You don't understand what an SJW is, and you're questioning, are you one? Because you believe in ideas of equality. Now, I find this supremely fucking funny because of something Eric Kane posted on his Twitter. This is from August 28th. I'm saying Divinity Original Sin is best game of the summer. What's yours? Putting aside the differences we may have in what a journalist does in regards to actual research before they publish an article, you stated, I've looked at the pics, I've followed the links, I've watched the videos, and you don't understand the whole SJW thing. Then you go on Twitter, and you say your favorite fucking game of the summer is Divinity Original Sin. Here's a fun fact. If you go back and look at that first video I put up, you might have noticed this blog post talking about hypersensitive journalists, white knights, and social justice. In fact, this particular person talks about how it interferes with their ability to do their fucking job as a creator. Do you know what game they worked on? Divinity Original Sin. your favorite game of the summer. You don't understand social justice warriors. You don't understand how this entire thing that's been going on for 2 weeks is important, and you want to hand wave it off, but you've done the research, you've looked at the videos, and yet the videos, mine and others, cite this as a fucking source, and then you go onto Twitter and talk about this very game when somebody who helped create it is telling you these people are fucking with their career. But that's not newsworthy. Now, if you'd done the legwork, if you had contacted them and maybe set up an interview, you'd have a better fucking idea for what people are talking about when they say agenda pushing, when they talk about social justice warriors, and when they talk about the impact that has on not only the consumer, but the developer of games. It is just frustratingly disappointing that the people who are perceived to be the better of game journalism fall into the same fucking pitfalls of refusing to look into things when people bring them up and circling the fucking wagons because you don't want to fling shit at your other fellow professionals, do you? That's what it feels like. So when you have all these different gaming sites putting media blackouts in place, refusing to talk about shit, and covering each other's backs, why do you think there's a notion of conspiracy? Well, how do you think that makes you look, Eric? How do you think that makes your profession look? Go check out the fucking, hashtag Gamergate. Maybe go do some more research, read some fucking tweets or something. Hell, at this point, I may as well become a contributor at Forbes. Why not fill out an application? Because obviously, the bar has been set really, really low. Why not? Why don't I get a job as a journalist there? And I'll read some fucking tweets and then whip up an article about it. Because that's apparently what research is nowadays. But you might be saying, wait a minute, Jim. You're a giant asshole. There's no way you could be a journalist. Well, I beg to differ. Let's take a look at some of these journalists and what they've been writing recently. Oh, here's one. Somebody asked, what does gamer even mean to you? And the response from somebody who's written articles for Polygon and other sites, shit person who cares way too much about video games. That's great. Good idea to insult the demographic. When I think Polygon from now on, I'm going to think people who think I'm an asshole and don't like people who play video games. Oh, here's another classy game journalist. My Twitter is full of wound-up nerds, proving my point all day. I love that as somebody who plays video games, to have the people who purport and claim to be fans of gaming and who want to write about gaming and work in the industry insult me. That makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Nerds, geeks, shit people. That's a really smart decision, and it doesn't make you all look like a bunch of bullying assholes. They may be saying, but again, Jim, you're a giant dick. That's true, but I'm not going around claiming I'm a fucking journalist, am I? You don't see my name slapped up on Kotaku. I didn't go get a master's degree in journalism, did I? But these people want to play pretend. They want to write on video game websites and pretend to be game journalists, and then go and behave in abhorrent ways. No, maybe they're just a little bit salty. Because, somebody, don't want to name drop them because they've been really pissy at them lately, tore them a new asshole so fucking large that you could drive a semi-truck through it. And they are very angry about that. Because it's not somebody they can just push around. It's somebody bigger than they are. They don't like that. They don't like the idea that somebody in a position of power wants to take a shit on them. Like, they're taking a shit on us. But no, I really do think, I think I'm going to become a game journalist. I'll even come up with my own agenda, because agendas are okay now. Maybe you all haven't heard of this yet, but having an agenda and being a journalist are not mutually exclusive things anymore. It's totally okay. Take this article, for example. Announcement readers who feel threatened by equality no longer welcome. Now, maybe you've never heard of this website, but it's apparently big in Australia. As they claim, we've also built one of Australia's most popular gaming news and review sites. And that funny little line under that, most experienced journalists. Well, let's see what kind of statements they make. As long as I am in charge of this ship, I will happily admit to pushing an agenda. Oh, and comments are closed on this article. That's another common theme among all these very brave journalists who like to go on Twitter and mock gamers. They'll immediately block them, and then they'll publish articles mocking them and close the comments, because they are such brave professionals who are so open to honest feedback that they run away like cowards. Which makes you wonder, is there any redeemable quality to these people, to their profession, to these websites? Over the past 2 weeks, we've uncovered a treasure trove of things they didn't want to talk about. And throughout the course of it all, they kept telling us there's nothing to discuss, there's nothing to address. Take Polygon, for instance. Here's a statement they released this past week about Patreon support. Patreon, again, is a service that's like a monthly stipend. You're not creating a product, you're just getting paid to exist. That's what Patreon is. Think of it like the Kickstarter for people, except they never start anything. They just sort of lazily lay about because you're fucking paying the rent. Why would they get off their ass? So here's Polygon saying that they see no issue with their reporters financially supporting people. So think the likes of Kohler or Kuchera, that's okay. We can't see any foreseeable bias that might emerge from you investing in people in an industry you report on. This is like black magic to them. They don't get it. It's hoodoo. It's all mystical and shit. But then again, this is Polygon we're talking about. It's not like they have ethics in the first place. I mean, after all, these are the people that allowed somebody to review a game who had a relationship with the developer. That's a real class act, Polygon. You're really lighting the fucking way to the future of journalism with your ethics and behavior these past 2 weeks. Now, Polygon wasn't the only one to release a statement. Kotaku did as well. Editor-in-Chief Stephen Totilo released a statement about Patreon as well. His was different. He said they did find that there were conflicts of interest with people who report on an industry donating to people in that industry. So that will no longer happen to Kotaku. Now you might say, isn't that great? Look, here's Stephen Totilo taking a stand. And in fact, didn't he also address that Nathan Grayson thing? I mean, it seems like Stephen is actually stepping up to the fucking plate. Yes, it seems like that. I'll grant you that. It seems like that. If you go back a little bit, you'll remember his statement. This is a part of it that he put up on Twitter before he had a chance to actually write something for Kotaku itself, talking about Grayson. My standard has long been this. Reporters who are in any way close to the people they might report on should recuse themselves from reporting about those with whom they're close. If they must report about them, disclosure is mandatory. Readers deserve that. Well, that sounds really good. I mean, that's a position we as gamers should be able to agree with. If you know somebody, you have a relationship with somebody, whatever it is, whether it's a friendship, a very close friendship, or a sexual or romantic relationship, or financial ties, you should recuse yourself from writing about them because it creates a conflict of interest. And I mean, here he is making all these public statements, so obviously he genuinely cares about this. Except for the fact that Kotaku has tried to very quietly smooth over some rough edges without making too public of a statement. Now, what would that rough edge be? Well, none other than Patricia Hernandez. Buckle in for this one, because it's really going to be great. Hopefully Eric Kane's still watching. I really think you should pay attention to this next little bit. It might be educational for him. Now, Patricia Hernandez had a couple of interesting Twitter conversations that got people looking through some things. Here's one she had with Christina Love. Patricia writes, "The neck region is kind of one of the best regions, period." Christina responds, "Gosh, I had no idea you felt that way." To which Patricia responds once more, "How are you supposed to play that off when you've dated me? Ah ha 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 ha." And just who is Christina? Why, she would be a game developer. A game developer Patricia Hernandez wrote about. She did more than just write about her. This isn't a little positive press. She recommended you buy the games and put links into the article directing you to the fucking store page. Oh, but it doesn't end there. No, one conflict of interest, that would just be amateur shit. Let's bump it up a little bit. Let's bring in some friends, too. How about Anna Anthropy? You know, another person Patricia personally knows, has a relationship of sorts with, maybe lived with. As you can see in this conversation that took place again on Twitter. And what do you know? Patricia wrote articles about her as well, giving her positive press and talking about her games and how interesting and insightful Anna Anthropy is. I also like those little updates on the articles, that address this. Oh, by the way, I know this article's fucking a year and a half old, but kinda had a relationship. Hopefully if anybody stumbles on this in an archive somewhere, they'll be alright with that. But they sure as shit didn't know at the time, did they, Patricia? So it comes off as slightly fucking disingenuous, Stephen, when you'll make public statements when you're pressured to, and address ethical problems when you're pressured to, but when you think you can kind of slip by it, you do something like this. You put a little addendum on there, and you don't address it in a upfront fucking public way. Which really begs the fucking question, what is it exactly that's going on here? Is it that Stephen Totilo doesn't know what his reporters are doing? Is he incompetent and oblivious to their ethical violations that are happening seemingly all over the fucking place? Whether it's financially, sexually, relationship-wise, press-wise? Or is he totally aware that these things are going on, but doesn't see a problem with them unless people pressure him about that? Because he's only responded to all of this shit ever since that blog post went up. So when I see other reporters saying that this is a non-fucking issue and a non-story and Gamergate isn't a thing, and we don't need to talk about Zoe and all that related shit? I don't believe it. Hell, just in Kotaku alone we have multiple examples of ethical breaches. And time again we're met with the most bizarre of responses, which makes me, like I said, wonder, what exactly is going on? Are you unaware that your reporters are out of fucking control? That they're having sex with people in relationships and reporting positive press in their favor? They're linking to their store pages and promoting their products? Were you unaware they're financially donating to people in an industry they cover? Are you covering it up? Are you only responding because there's criticism against you? Do you genuinely believe in ethical standards for a reporter? For journalism? What exactly is going on at fucking Kotaku? What is going on at Gawker Media? Now, hopefully Eric Kane did listen to this portion, because it leads me to this point. By being sloppy about how you investigate things, this is what comes about. And believe me, Steven has been led down this road. Here's a statement from him 2 years ago in the comments of a Week in Kotaku article. This is regarding Robert Florence and corruption in gaming. Look at what he wrote in response to that. I don't think it's an important story, but that would take actual reporting to find out, and I just don't care enough about the latest supposed media scandal to ask my reporters to look into it. How pervasive is this attitude in your industry? No wonder none of you want to look at Zoe Quinn. It's not just that you have connections to her. It's not just that you're corrupt. You're fucking lazy. You don't want to be bothered to do the work. That requires effort, and who wants to do effort? You're just glorified bloggers. And apparently, people in the industry see right through you. They know exactly what you're up to. They know exactly how you operate. And they're just not going to be bothered with your bullshit. But now it's the customer, now it's the reader, now it's the consumer that's come around to that. Now, when the Zoe Quinn story first broke out, when this entire shitstorm first erupted, we were constantly told it was of no interest. They didn't care that she had been in relationships with people in gaming journalism, and this has been confirmed by Stephen Totilo himself after interviewing Nathan Grayson. This is his own statement, that yes, we did have a relationship, but the timeline doesn't line up. That's something that Eric Kane said in his article, and other people have speculated on and stated, and yet there's evidence that's floating out there that shows that's actually not correct, that they've had conversations about taking trips together, that the Las Vegas trip itself skews the timeline, and that there's more going on to it, but you don't want to investigate that, because that's reporting, and that takes work. Just like I'm sure you guys didn't care about the fine young capitalists getting their shit kicked in by Zoe Quinn, having evidence of this taking place. You don't care about that. Who cares? It's just somebody trying to support women in game development. You don't care about women in game development. You care about putting on a false face to make a profit. You clickbaiting cowards. I mean, my God, right now, at this very moment, there's a plethora of connections and information relating to this entire thing. Here's a tweet to Zoe Quinn back in February. Yeah. We exploded their site, oh my God, us. To which Zoe Quinn responds, oops, we DDoSed something by accident. Now, if you look at the entire conversation, it's them talking about harassing the fine young capitalists, it's them talking about going after the fine young capitalists, and throwing out criticisms that are frankly untrue and have been proven to be untrue. Now, who exactly is that that's making that tweet to Zoe? That's kind of interesting. I wonder, do they have any connection to any of this? Why, that account, that Twitter account, is owned by Maya Kramer. Well, who is Maya Kramer? Well, Maya Kramer would be in PR. More specifically, Maya Kramer happens to have connections. She works for Silver String Media. And guess who happens to be an advisor on Silver String Media? Anita Sarkeesian. Well, what a fucking coincidence. But hey, that's not the only coincidence. You remember that Indie Arcade Award that Zoe got on Depression Quest, and the people that are responsible for selecting the games that get chosen for awards? The people involved with that organization? It wasn't just Robin Arnott, it was also Maya Kramer. Correct! She's involved in that too. You know, speaking of Anita Sarkeesian, what has she been up to? Well, that's an interesting tweet. Video games, misogyny, and terrorism, a guide to assholes at badassdigest.com. Well, let's go take a look at that article. Well, that looks like a wonderful article about good, positive gamer culture. I'm sure it's not spinning a narrative at all. But Badass Digest, why does that sound so familiar? Wait a minute, do I know who's the editor? No, I'm sorry, the badass-in-chief at Badass Digest? Oh, that would be Devin Ferrasi. You know, the guy who doxes women on his Twitter account. Don't worry about it though, Anita. It's not like you're a feminist or anything. And besides, he has excuses. It's just a stupid fucking woman. He doesn't care. He'll put her information out there. You know, doxing women on Twitter, giving them harassment. You know, he's got justifications. Oh, who cares? It's a temporary email account. What's going to happen? It's not like they'd get threatened or harassed. But Devin Ferrazzi, why does that... It still sounds familiar. What else do I know him from? Oh, he was the guy that was making jokes saying that he respects ISIS more than the people who are against Zoe Quinn. Now, wasn't ISIS the terrorist organization that kills real journalists? I'm stunned. Why would Anita Sarkeesian, a feminist, be linking to a website run by a man who doxes women and supports terrorism? That's fucking crazy. That's almost as bad as being an advisor at a PR firm that has relations to a person that destroys game jams dedicated to women. Now, Mr. Ferrazzi here likes to compare people that are interested in Gamergate to ISIS, as in saying that we have a jihad against them, that this is some holy crusade. Well, he would be wrong. It's not a jihad, it's not a crusade, it's not even a revolution. It's a reformation. We are walking up to your front fucking door, and we are nailing our edict on it. Because we have seen what you've been doing to the thing we consider holy. You've been shitting it up with your corruption and your close relationships and your financial ties and spinning narratives that basically desecrates the thing we love. And when I say something like spinning narratives, that's exactly what I mean. See, ever since this Gamergate thing broke and people started calling out all these websites on the shady, underhanded shit they've been engaged in, that's been verified by people at these websites, whether they've excused it or admitted to it, we suddenly got this. A barrage that took place between the 28th and the 29th of article after article after article, one after the other, non-fucking stop, all saying the same thing. The gamer identity is dead. Gamers are horrible people. Gamers are terrible. They're misogynistic. They're sexist. We need to get rid of them. Well, excuse me for being a bit fucking incredulous here, but when I see 10 fucking articles all drop on the same day saying the exact same fucking thing, it almost feels like, I don't know, a PR company might be involved. Like, these independent journalistic websites aren't really independent at all. Like, maybe they're colluding with one another to put forward a narrative, a message, a talking point, or an agenda that they want to shove down the throat of the consumer. It almost seems like a hissy fit, like tantruming children that are upset that they've been dragged into the fucking daylight where they get exposed. And hell, this video has gotten so long, I've talked about so much of this shit at this point, because there's so many fucking examples of it, that I can't even get back to the Max Temkin thing. Yeah, that's right, apparently Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend posted more information in relation to Max Temkin's rape apology that he posted online. Apparently, guess who wrote that for him? Zoe Quinn. And why did she write it for him? Because he was going to financially support her game jam, and she didn't want bad PR, so she wanted to craft a message she thought would appeal to people. Are you fucking kidding me with this shit? Does it ever end? Is there a bottom? Have we reached it yet? I can't tell anymore. I want to drop a fucking nickel and listen to how long it takes before it starts bouncing off something. For the past 2 weeks now, we've been repeatedly told that this is a non-story and that nobody's interested, and yet all the information we have says otherwise. Site after site has repeatedly talked about it. Some of the biggest threads that have ever appeared on forums are about this very thing. Websites that are repositories for information have been accessed hundreds of thousands of times, Google searches 500,000 fucking times. It gets bigger and bigger by the day. If you think attacking us and trying to spin this on us is going to work, you are sadly mistaken. And I think perhaps the craziest thing about this all is that somebody needs to get a hold of Jeff Keighley and tell him to say thank you to Kotaku and Polygon and Rock Paper Shotgun and all of the others, because they've made him look good. Guess whose name hasn't been connected to any of this shit? Jeff Keighley. Guess what website hasn't been connected to any of this shit? IGN. He may be the fucking Dorito Pope, but at least he's clean in my eyes. Because after all, popes are celibate. And that's how I know he, sure as shit, ain't one of the 5 guys.
Sex for favors, secrets, cover-ups, corruption. I've heard things that'll blow your mind. Who cut the power off? Wait, what do you mean we've been cancelled? I'll have you know I was the governor of Minnesota. We're being replaced by who?
Oh, look at me. I'm Jesse Ventura. My show got canceled. We all know whose government you're working for, Jesse. It's time the real truth came out. By the power of water filters, I will destroy corruption. No more sex for secrets. No more cover-ups. It's time for Gamergate.
Welcome to Bizarro Land. It's the sort of place where electronics arts employees make reasonable statements, where Bobby Kotick is once again proven to have keen business intuition when it comes to certain individuals and their ability to manage projects and handle money. It's the sort of Twilight Zone-esque reality where site owners who've had positions in the past have seemingly swapped them, a la some digital version of Freaky Friday. Why, even Hot Pockets has responded, saying that the janitorial staff from 4chan is doing an excellent job. In fact, they deserve a reward, and what better reward than the hot, creamy goodness of a nuked Hot Pocket burning and scalding your throat as it explodes in your stomach. It has been a wild ride. It's been a month now since the last video I put up talking about Gamergate and the issues that were popping up, and by God, a lot of shit has happened since then, and I want to try to condense it down and give you a sort of chronological retelling of some of the key events that have played out over the last 4 weeks. To do that, I'm going to have to breeze through some of these, but I'll provide plenty of links in the description, so if you want to go and check this out yourself, the links will be listed to different articles and screen caps, so you can go check it out and see what you think. So with that out of the way, let's jump back to September 1st and see what's happened over the last month. Well, the first week of September was just chock full of interesting events. In fact, news came from PAX about Zoe Quinn's panel. Literally, tens of people showed up for it. As you can see from this non-packed picture, of all those not existing people sitting in those empty chairs. In fact, I heard one of the staff members at this event had told people to be careful with their pocket change in case they accidentally drop something, and the reverberations of it created an echo so loud it was like a sound cone that would deafen people walking by the building. Luckily for Quinn, of course, DashCon members happened to be in attendance, and they had the solution that she needed. And it didn't even cost her $17,000. What a lucky day for Zoe Quinn. Now, right on the heels of that, we had 2 articles drop. One pro-Gamergate, one anti-Gamergate. And we're going to look at the anti one first. That was from Jen Frank for The Guardian. Now, Jen ran into a little bit of trouble. You know, apparently when you write an article and you have financial ties to the people you're talking about, that's kind of an issue in real journalism, and Jen apparently walked away from being a journalist for a little while in relation to this, because there was money coming from Quinn to her, and from her going to Maya Kramer, who had a relationship with Zoe Quinn as well. It did not look too good for Jen Frank, and people were a little pissed off, to put it lightly. Image macros were circulating, people were talking to The Guardian. Now, Frank had released a statement essentially saying that she had wanted to put a disclaimer in there, but The Guardian told her, no, don't do that. A little incredulous about that, but doesn't really matter, because we had a new challenger approach. Milo Papadopoulos, famous television actor from Webster, and also body double for Phoenix Wright. Now, he began to tweet out at the very beginning of September that he was going to start to cover Gamergate. He was going to look into some things. And his first article really caught people's attention because he wasn't tepid or timid in how he handled the subject. In fact, he wasn't afraid of these corrupt journalists or their little buddies in the indie game development scene. His article, Feminist Bullies Tearing the Video Game Industry Apart, was well received. It got a lot of buzz online because it was the first real article to take the other position, to actually look into it. Now, Milo doesn't have any investment in the gaming industry. He's not a gamer. In fact, he had to learn how to play video games. He did a couple of live streams about them, just to get an idea of what the experience was like and what the gaming demographic was like. In fact, it would seem the very first week of September had a lot to do with news articles being released in news websites. Take the gaming website TechRaptor, for instance. Not only did their site host pull their support from them, sending them to talk about it publicly, saying, hey, you know, we've got an issue to deal with. We're going to have to look for a new server. You can see this in the screen cap. This is the conversation that was taking place about this. But it would seem that after that got resolved, they were shadow banned from Reddit, and on top of it, they had their website attacked in some manner that took them a few days to even be able to address it and fix the issue. Now, as a side note, I'm going to put a link to their website in the description because they were one of the very first websites to really even try to talk about this. They're a smaller website. And they tried to go to bat for gamers. They tried to talk about the issue because everybody else was being quiet about it. Nobody wanted to cover the issue. And as a response, they got harassed. They had their site taken down. They got banned from websites where they could promote or talk about their work. And that's unfair. It's unfair to the little guy trying to make a name for themselves in the industry. So if you're interested in gaming news, check it out. Give them a look. I'll also have Games Nosh down there as well because they were another site that really tried to at least talk about it. Both those sites really stick out in my mind from the very beginning of all these things that have happened until this point today. Of course, not wanting to look like less of a prick than their gaming journalist peers, GamerRanks decided to fire a few shots off at the fine young capitalist, saying that they don't have an excuse to be safe from scrutiny. And their hit piece, GamerRanks went after them and picked apart at what the fine young capitalists were about, and they were very brave too by closing the comment section down so they didn't have to hear any feedback. Now, that doesn't surprise me considering this is a website associated with Ian Miles Chong, former white supremacist. In fact, he might be the only Asian white supremacist I've ever heard of. That is one hell of an accomplishment, Ian. You can see from the screen cap that floated around shortly after this that Ian has one hell of a history and some very unique viewpoints. Now, he's gone onto Twitter afterwards to say he's a changed individual. Now, instead of being a white supremacist, he's just an asshole in general, using social justice to beat up on people he doesn't like. Seems like a brand new leaf. He's really turned it around. Give him a golf clap if you can. Now, for those of you not familiar with who Ian Miles Chong is, he is a self-described turbo-feminist. He was also working at the site and defending it during the KSI incident where he had gone up to people at a convention and motorboated a few chicks. Ian had gone to Twitter to say how terrible this was and had articles on GamerRank saying how horrible this was, until the very woman that was motorboated by KSI in that video went on Twitter herself and told Miles he needs to get fucking laid and stop putting his nose in other people's business. Apparently that advice did not stick. And closing out that first week of September, we had a bit of a bombshell drop, especially in relation to what was going on at Reddit. If you recall, a lot of people were getting comments deleted, especially in that Total Biscuit thread that had upwards of, I think, 25 to 30,000 comments, and tens of thousands of those comments were deleted. Threads were being taken down at a majority of subreddits. People were getting shadow banned, and even more recently, we were just talking about TechRaptor having their account shadow banned. Well, this was a leaked interview between a moderator or former moderator at Reddit that helped to highlight some of the issues that are going on with the administration of the website. And it covered a lot of things, talking about hidden code, bannable word lists, allowing certain people to be doxxed because the administration didn't like them, people being threatened with being labeled a pedophile for trying to provide security for users on the website, as well as their attitude about shadow banning and deleting topics. Now, that audio interview is up on SoundCloud. I'll have a link down in the description if you want to go listen to it. It's about 40 or 50 minutes long, but it really gives some insight into what the hell's going on over there. If you've been shadow banned, if you've felt some weird things are going on behind the scenes, it really helps to explain exactly why you're not crazy and probably what you're thinking is happening is actually happening. Now, not to be outdone by week 1, week 2 was right out of the gates. It started off with its own bang. That was a Lord Cat stream on Twitch TV in which he was talking to some people about an upcoming video that was going to be released. That video, Indie Feasible, was put up by Camera Lady and Short Fat Otaku. That was the channel on YouTube that it appeared on. In the video, there were quite a few allegations about IndieCade and the Independent Games Festival and talking about the relationships these people had, and information that had come to light after the Polytron hack that took place about 2 or 3 weeks prior. Now, the video was taken down, and there's been some debate as to the exact reason why. There seems to be some sort of legal issue about the information that's in the video itself. I don't really know. I haven't had a chance to talk to either of the individuals that put the video up. I know they've made some statements, and I know that they were talking about re-editing it and having a lawyer vet it so it was good to go. But I do know that they are releasing a third video that's coming up in the next couple of days, and it's going to focus on Silver String Media. So hopefully they can get those re-edited videos up, and they can get that new one out. Now, if you're curious about some of the information they talked about in the first couple of videos, you can go check out this GamesNosh article. I'll have a link in the description as well that goes over some of the information they talked about. Again, it's not the video itself, but it does touch on what they were talking about. Now, up until this point, we had seen a couple of things. We'd seen Kotaku and we'd seen Polygon make some statements in regards to allegations that had come out. Kotaku released statements about Nathan Grayson and his relationship with Zoe Quinn. Stephen Totilo had gone on record saying that they were going to adjust Kotaku's guidelines in reference to Patreon and being able to donate to people in the industry on a monthly basis. Polygon as well did a article talking about their stance on Patreon, but they didn't take the same route that Kotaku did, instead deciding that, hey, there's nothing wrong with this, we don't see an issue. It's not a ethical concern. Well, we finally got a real response. The first website to really step up to the plate. Now, the Escapists had allowed conversation about this up until this point in their discussion forum, but there hadn't been an official policy or response. Many people were still upset about the Zoe Quinn story from months and months and months ago that had blamed her harassment on a website called WizardChan. Well, there was a publisher's note put up, and it addressed quite a lot of things. In that publisher's note, and it's 5 pages long, again, the link will be in the description, they go over a few things, but one of the main things, and I think the most important thing, is they apologize. They apologize for not trying to get the other side of the story. They also set out a new set of standards, what their policy is in regards to authors recusing themselves from covering certain subjects, about Patreon and financial donation, and a whole host of other things. But The Escapist was really the first one to do this. Even though Kotaku and Polygon had addressed some concerns, they didn't come forward and actually try to talk to their community about it. Also this week, we had Milo releasing another article talking to games journalists directly and telling them that he thought they were reacting poorly to the concerns of gamers and those that felt that there were issues going on in the industry. Another piece of news that came out during this time, because people were starting to talk about corruption on all levels in the journalism industry and in gaming itself, was this post that showed up on subreddit Kotaku in Action. This was posted by somebody who said he worked in the Australian gaming journalism business. Now, he had a lot of things to say, but one of the more interesting things that he had put up was that there had been a hack of forums, that 40,000 accounts had been put in danger, and that EA had not responded and the gaming press had not responded because they had relationships with each other. Well, 2 days later, Cinema Blend put up an article, and in fact, EA admits 40,000 users were hacked after a whistleblower steps forward. Let that sink in for a moment. Here you have somebody posting and saying, hey, because of a relationship between this video game company and journalists, this was a story that was not reported on. 40,000 people, their passwords, their usernames, potentially their emails, and personal identifying information were put at risk. But this story was not going to be covered because of close relationships between the gaming press and the industry they cover. And this isn't just smoke being blown up your ass. Somebody actually looked into this. And sure enough, it turns out that actually fucking happened. This is another clear-cut example of the problem when you have too close a relationship with the industry you're covering. The first of which would have been the fine young capitalists not being able to get anybody to cover their story. And of course, up until this point, right now, we're in the middle of the second week of September, that's still happening. Here's Jason Schreier of Kotaku saying, hey, I'm not going to cover the fine young capitalist story. It's too messy for me. And I don't think it's, interesting enough, or I don't think there's enough valid points. I don't know what exactly his deflection was. You can read it here. It's in a post that he had put up. Not that it really mattered, though, because the Fine Young Capitalists, on September 11th, hit their fundraising goal. In fact, they didn't just hit it, they surpassed it. So all the people that had donated had succeeded in helping them reach that goal and push that game development process further ahead. Now you may be wondering, with all these things that are happening, you've got Reddit mods coming forward and saying that people are trying to hush up conversation about this. You have evidence that moderators are talking to Zoe Quinn and suppressing conversation. People are coming forward from fucking Australia saying EA accounts have been put in danger but nobody will cover it because the journalists are friends with the people at EA. You've got the escapists coming forward and saying, hey, we fucked up, we're going to address it, and we're going to reform our policies. You have the fine young capitalists hitting their fundraising goal. And yet, still, at this point, no other sites are talking about any of this. The Gamers Are Dead articles had come out, and that was really it. So you would think it would be weird that Jason Schreier would say there's not a story here. Well, you're going to find out exactly why nobody was covering any of these things. You'll find out why Jason Schreier didn't think this was of interest. Because in week 3, a fucking nuclear bomb is dropped on the heads of these shitty, corrupt game journalists that help to highlight exactly what the fuck is going on. Now, I want to preface week 3 before we get into it, because there are a couple of things. I'm trying to give you a short and dirty chronology to what's going on. But a lot of things happen, and the timeline in which they happen is kind of important. It's going to be important later on, specifically when I'm talking about 4chan and Moot, when I'm talking about XOXO Fest, when I'm talking about all these things. So I'm going to try to lay it out as it happened, but I want you to pay attention to the dates that these happen on. Now, at the start of week 3, we got introduced to the Kool-Aid drinking crazies of XOXO Fest. In fact, people started doing image edits of pictures that were coming from this particular convention. The one you're looking at right now is a pretty good descriptor of the vibe you get when you're looking at XOXO. You see a lot of the same type of person. 20 to 30-year-old, white suburbanite, educated, entrepreneurial, hipster fucks would be the best way really to describe that crowd. And then mix in a little bit of venture capitalism, and that's pretty much what you have. But a lot of the people who attended this have been related either directly or tangentially to Gamergate itself. You had people like Leigh Alexander from Gamasutra who was there. Anita Sarkeesian was there. And as we'll find out in just a little bit, Moot, or Christopher Poole from 4chan, was also there. Now, on the 16th, Based Mom, Christina Summers, released a video, a factual feminist video, asking, are video games sexist? And she looked at the issue and she came to the conclusion that No, gamers are not a demographic of horribly racist, sexist people that are out to hurt others. They're just devoted to their hobby. They like video games, and at the end of the day, that's what they want, just good video games. People liked the video. They responded quite well to it. Of course, the game journalists didn't. We got a lot of articles after that video came out attacking Christina Summers. They were up on Polygon and other websites, and they tried every avenue of attack. She's a conservative. She's not an actual feminist. She's suffering from internalized misogyny. Anything but addressing the points the video raised. Now, beginning around the release of this video, and up until about the 19th, so in the span of 3 days, people started to notice something happening on 4chan, specifically on the V-board and even later on Poll. They noticed mods were doing it for free much more than they usually did. The frequency of them fucking with users was increasing exponentially every day. Now, we would find out exactly why that was in just a little bit. But first, that bombshell. Now, Milo had hinted that something big was coming out. He had said, you guys aren't going to fucking believe this. All those talks that you've had, all the speculation about there being some kind of coordinated attack, especially when you consider that the Gamers Are Dead articles seem to be a coordinated attack. You had 12 to 14 articles in a 24-hour period of time with the exact same spin, the exact same narrative, all yelling at gamers who were upset that video game journalism might be corrupt. And to gamers, that looked like there was something going on, like there was a secret group coordinating what was happening. Well, the bombshell hit. There was a secret group, Game Journos Pro. Now, the list had been established about 4 years previously by Kyle Orland of Ars Technica. And among the members, you will find prominent figures from nearly every video game journalism website. People like Jason Schreier. You remember Jason, who just a week before the article had come out had said, I don't want to cover the fine young capitalist. There's no reason to do it. I don't see a story here. Well, now we know why he didn't want to cover it. He is a member of Game Journos Pro. And what did they talk about on Game Journos Pro? Well, this very first article had touched on one of the threads and one of those email chains. And one of those email chains was about Zoe Quinn. How they were going to handle the story, how they were going to handle the fallout of it. And you can notice, and I highly encourage you to go read the article that Milo put out, because he has snippets up of exactly what they said. And in fact, later on, he'll release even more information about this particular group. But you will see they keep each other in line. People like Ben Kuchera would yell at others and tell them that he was going to stop talking to him at that exact moment because he wanted to remain civil. Greg Tito of The Escapist was on this particular group, and he had said, we have a conversation going on at The Escapist. I don't necessarily agree with what's being said, but I don't see a problem with it. And he was bombarded for daring to allow open conversation. Ryan Smith had mentioned, why is it that we cover one sort of topic, but we won't cover the other? Why will people run pieces like Max Temkin? But when it comes to Zoe Quinn, which is pretty much the exact same kind of issue, we will not cover it. And he was bombarded with hate for even asking that question. People in this specific group knew Zoe Quinn. They had a personal relationship with her. One particular individual talked about having conversations about his relationship with her, and specifically mentioning the Feel Better gift that was proposed in this group itself. If you remember the developer letter that was circulating around that was signed by people in different video game companies, saying that they wanted peace and, give peace a chance and everybody should love one another and hold hands, you will see the predecessor of that discussed by games journalists weeks before that letter ever materialized. They wanted to do the exact same thing, but with game journalists. And the idea was shot down because it would look too suspicious. So how fucking convenient then that after that was proposed in this secret group of game journalists who were stifling conversation about Zoe Quinn and about gaming journalism corruption, how convenient is it that their proposal is put a halt to, and then all of a sudden game developers decide to do it? It's almost like they used their connections and personal relationships to get game developers to do it instead. Remember, in week 2, we had the story about somebody saying games journalists wouldn't cover a story about a forum being hacked because they were friends with people at a video game company, with the developers. So it's clear that there is an incestuous relationship going on here, that there's collusion taking place here. This was a damning article. Now, they tried to deflect and they tried to act like this wasn't a big deal. However, reading through the conversations, you can see that is complete bullshit from their part. Now, going back to our timeline, as I said, the week started and we had all these weird pictures coming out of XOXO Fest. And then we had Summers release her factual feminist video. And then came the bombshell, as I said, Milo released the Game Journos Pro article, his first article about it. Well, during those, those couple of days, people had noticed the heavy moderation taking place on 4chan, and they wanted a direct answer. They tried asking mods, and mods had told them to go fuck themselves. Well, finally, Moot steps in. And of course, he comes to save the day, right? This is Moodles. This is Christopher Poole. This is Mr. Free Speech. Well, you would be dead wrong. He posts this. Gamergate discussions will no longer be allowed, and pretty much go fuck yourself. If you read that last line, I know the screen cap might be a little blurry, I apologize for it, but he essentially takes a parting jab at people interested in Gamergate and tries to tell them to fuck off and that they're no different really than Guy Fawkes mask wearing idiots. That is a level of respect he has for Gamergate, and the fact he's using Anonymous as an insult means he doesn't give a shit about them either. Now, I'm not going to go too much into depth right now. Like I said, I just want to give you a basic timeline. But be aware, at this convention Moot was at, along with people like Leigh Alexander and Anita Sarkeesian, were venture capitalists. Venture capitalists who he had previous relationships with, who funded projects he worked on. And we would also come to find out, and again, this will be covered more in depth later on, that he had relationships with people working directly at Gawker. Gawker is the parent company of Kotaku. Now, it's around this exact same time that the Greg Lisby interview is starting to circulate a little bit more. Now, this was somebody who was interviewed. He wasn't specifically briefed on every aspect of Gamergate. He was just asked certain questions in regards to journalism ethics. He is somebody who taught law and journalism ethics, so he would be somebody you would want to talk to about. Now, the raw, unedited interview is up on YouTube. Again, the link will be in the description. You can go watch it yourself. But some of the key points he touches on, and what I find to be really damning when you look at the game journalist, is he's asked, what about people being financially connected to the industry they cover? Absolutely not, he says. That is an ethical problem. What about people having romantic relationships or landlord and tenant relationships with people in an industry they cover? Absolutely not. That is an ethical problem. He even goes so far as to state that though you may develop friendships or you may have a cordial relationship with people in an industry that you cover, it is an extremely tenuous line that you're walking, and that a good journalist should always be hyper-vigilant in regards to something like that. And as this Game Journos Pro article that Milo had put out shows, games journalists are anything but vigilant. They are lazy, ego-centered assholes. Now, I don't want to make this sound like I'm applying this as a blanket statement to every games journalist. Now, we've seen a lot of them step up and say, either I have problems with this, and you'll see that in the leaked emails that's up on the Breitbart article. Some people in that email chain said, hey, you know what? This is wrong. I don't want any part of it. There is a wall that should be put up between myself and a subject, and this is a breach of professional ethics. Other people would come out later and say, I didn't like it, or I wanted no part of it. People directly questioned it. So there are good games journalists, but there seems to be an atmosphere or an attitude in this particular industry where those people are suppressed and not really allowed to talk about it. I mean, my God, look how they treat each other in private. It's no wonder the majority of them don't want to say anything in public. They're going to get shit on in such a way that their careers will be over. Now, if you thought week 3 was already over with, you'd better hold on to your asses, because when you look at the entire month of September in review, from the period of the 14th to the 21st, was a massive amount of activity. From articles being posted to public stances being taken from different individuals inside and outside of the industry. Take this niche gamer article from an Xbox dev. One of the people who worked on the Xbox design team weighed in on Gamergate. Again, it's a fantastic article, and it gives you an inside perspective on how they view these issues. But of course, Milo wasn't done either. After releasing that first Game Journos Pro article, he had one more to pop out. And this one has to be read to be believed. The emails that prove video games journalism must be reformed, and even looking at that title quote, who here hasn't slept with a PR person or game developer, am I right, helps to highlight one of the issues with games journalism. It is a two-faced nature of them telling their audience that they're misogynist and racist and sexist and horrible, yet behind closed doors they will make jokes about sex and jokes about unethical behavior, and there's no consequence to it whatsoever. It's fine for them to do it, but not okay for us to do it. They're going to chide us and profiteer off telling the core audience that they're flawed and that there's something wrong with them. And that little voice most people have in the back of their head telling them not to be insufferable pricks 24 hours a day seems to be missing from a lot of these people. Just take a look at the deluge of articles I had mentioned against Summers for her video. Now, one interesting thing about the social justice warrior mentality found in a lot of these gaming journalists who are at the core of the problem we're dealing with is they can dish it, but they can't take it. This quote is from the Polygon article about Summers' video. Summers is also fond of insults. She tweeted that I am a mansplainer and invited me to address what she describes as her ideas. Others added that because I question the views of one woman, I must be a misogynist. One person compared me to Napoleon, the pig, not the emperor. I am not the first person to face the wrath of video game sexism deniers. Well, I think the person who wrote this article needs to listen and believe, you mansplaining misogynist. It is yet just another example of how they can fling shit, but they cannot handle it being flung back at them. If you read the email chains that they have between themselves, you'll see how they laud the idea of closing down and heavily regulating comments. They cannot stand when people give them criticism. They cannot stand having to answer for their actions or their statements. It's also by this point in September that we start to see that the people who have been writing and mass emailing advertisers are finally having an effect. Now, there were few that already had come out and said, we're going to pull advertising from these different game journalism sites, or we're not going to associate with them because it's bad PR. But then we see something like this from Rock Paper Shotgun, essentially begging for money. Rock Paper Shotgun is now running the equivalent of a Patreon account asking you to directly pay them money for merely existing and writing terrible articles. And yet, still there's even more in this third week. The admin of Funny Junk takes a moment to shit on Moot's head and laugh at the fact that he can't handle people talking about something that personally might offend him. In fact, the admin of Funny Junk invites people to come and mock him. And this is just a reminder that Funny Junk is one of the only places that has allowed free discussion about this, up there with The Escapist and a few other image boards and websites. But Funny Junk has had that position from the very beginning. You can talk about whatever you want, put up the content you want to, and we're not going to interfere in any way. Now, most people have probably noticed by this point that NeoGAF had refused to really allow any discussion about this. People had been banned from the forums. Conversations had been shut down repeatedly. Well, it starts to come out that maybe NeoGAF had a reason for that. This article that was put up on the Ralph Retort talks about NeoGAF and the site owner allegedly illegally selling content to Kotaku for a profit. Now, they had done this action, and then if you look back at the timeline of these events, had changed their terms of service agreement to allow them to do it. But the fact of the matter is, this article points out a timeline in which they had sold the information and then altered the terms of service to make it allowable. Well, bravo, NeoGAF. And of course, who could forget about Dina? God bless Mighty Number 9. You know, banning people that are financial backers to a project because they're talking about something unrelated to that project at different locations on the internet. And then saying, I don't like what you're saying, so I'm going to block you from the forums and from the official Concept Twitter account. This is extra ridiculous when you take into account the fact that one of the backer rewards for donating to the project was forum access. So by banning people from the forums, you are rescinding their reward. Now, people began to ask for refunds. They wanted to do chargebacks, and they were told they couldn't. Well, that's a great job from a really good PR manager. Obviously, she got the job because she was the most qualified, not because she knew people at the company or was dating somebody who worked there. That would be insane. And if you're interested in reading more about how the Mighty Number 9 shitfest is now continuing into Gamergate, feel free to read the Ralph Retort because they have an article up about that as well. And this all, of course, brings us up to the current week, week 4, or the very end of it. And this week has been slow compared to the third week, but then again, with the amount of activity that happened from the 14th to the 21st, it's understandable, especially when you look at it all put together. A lot of things have happened. Well, what happened this last week? Quite a few things, actually. You had the Investigator come on to the Amazing Atheist channel to do a video about Gamergate. In fact, a lot of prominent atheists have spoken about this, and it's understandable because I think at the core of it, they see a similar thing happening right now. Now, I was able to do a live stream about 2 or 3 days ago with King of Pole, and he had somebody on named Koss, and Koss had mentioned something that we had joked about all the way back around the time of PAX, and that was the idea that they were going to introduce the term Gamer Plus. Now, atheists know what that means. They dealt with it with Atheism Plus when social justice warriors come into a community and shit it up. Well, Koss actually said that he personally views the use of the term player as a more apt title. So essentially, instead of Gamer Plus, it would be player. So perhaps those rumors back during PAX about Gamers Plus being introduced weren't so far off if they're if the other side is already looking at trying to change and find a new term? Well, it wasn't just the Amazing Atheist. You've had people like Thunderfoot make quite a few videos. In fact, he suffered because of it. He put up videos criticizing Anita Sarkeesian onto his Twitter account. And because he dared to do that, his Twitter was put on a blockbot list, and it was taken off of Twitter itself. He had his account shut down. Now you can look through his posting history. People have screen caps of the last handful of posts that he put up, and nothing about them violates the terms of service. He was bullied off for daring to speak out, for daring to have another opinion. So you have people like the Amazing Atheist and Thunderfoot stepping in and talking about this. You have people like Justicar stepping in and talking about this. And these aren't necessarily positions of people who are gamers themselves, just bystanders who recognize something that's happening to the gaming community that they already went through. You have other signs that gamers are sick of game journalism and they're sick of SJWs in their hobby. One good example of this would be the Steam curator list. If you go to take a look, who's the top curator? It's not Kotaku, it's not Polygon, it's not Rock Paper Shotgun or PC Gamer or any of them. Who is it? Total Biscuit. A top spot for a top hat. And it's interesting too that he has the #1 spot, because if you go and read those Breitbart articles about the Game Journo Pro mailing list, you will quickly see that they dislike Total Biscuit. In fact, they shit talk a lot of YouTubers. They do not like the idea of somebody else coming in and fulfilling the role that they have. Because if somebody else brings competition into the marketplace, they can't be corrupt assholes. They actually have to have standards then, so they can compete. How fucking crazy is that? Now, maybe you're wondering exactly who's on that Game Journo's Pro list. I mean, after all, the previous couple of articles had talked about certain emails, but we never got a complete list. Well, Milo's got you covered because his most recent article actually lists every single one of them. So if you're curious who is working at what website and is a part of this, go check out the article because it will have their name listed and where they work. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Sarkeesian Effect documentary. That is still up on Patreon. Right now it's sitting at $6,600 a month. That is $6,600 of people's money that they're willing to put forward towards this project because they want to hear a different viewpoint. They're so sick, so absolutely tired of games journalists creating an atmosphere where people can't criticize or bring up other points of view. I mean, look what happened to Thunderfoot. He tried to use a social media service to air his opinions, and he was cut off at the fucking knees for it. So it's not a surprise that people would go and try to fund their own documentary to bring up an opposing viewpoint, because God knows where else are they going to go at this point. But every day this goes on, every single day it continues. It builds momentum, even during the slow days, even during the slow weeks. Hell, just take a look at the hashtags for Gamergate or Not Your Shield. This week, Gamergate surpassed 1 million tweets, and Not Your Shield is well over 100,000. Now, those numbers on their own are impressive, but when you consider the fact that multiple sites have refused to allow people to comment, from NeoGAF to 4chan, TV Tropes, and others, it is a remarkable thing that this has any momentum to it at all. But it shows the fact that gamers are sick of being talked down to. They are sick of corrupt people trying to act as if they don't have to have ethical standards. They are sick of people acting like the indie scene and games in general don't have issues to them. These past 4 weeks have highlighted that, and it has been one thing after another, momentum building upon momentum, bombshell after bombshell after bombshell. And when you sit back and you really take in the full picture, it is quite fucking remarkable.
Well, folks, I think we've reached a new benchmark in political correctness, because apparently PC culture has infected street signage. You see, I was driving down Bathurst Street in Thornhill, just a pinch north of Toronto. There's a lot of construction going on here. I have no idea what they're doing, although it seems to be taking forever. I do hope the completion deadline will be met, though, which I believe is just prior to the second coming of Christ. In any event, check out this sign that urges motorists to slow down. As you can see, it depicts a young boy saying, "Slow down, my mom works here." Then I make a right on Center Street, and sure enough, I'm confronted with more construction, and yet again, there's that photo admonishing motorists to slow down, my mom works here. But here's the thing, every time I drive by this area, I never see any mums working on the road. Oh, I'm sure there are female construction workers, much like there are male nurses, But I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that the construction industry is overwhelmingly male. Hey, construction is more or less, on average, a guy kind of thing. Not many women I've encountered have a hankering to pour hot asphalt on a humid summer day or freeze their ball bearings off in the dead of winter. Can't say I blame them either. So given that construction is an overwhelmingly male-dominated industry, and perhaps always will be, shouldn't the sign read, "My dad works here"? Or is this yet another example of how fatherhood has been devalued by the progressives? The idea that some desk-bound bureaucrat in York Region is eager to allow political correctness to eclipse reality because, hey, fathers just aren't all that important in this day and age in which there's almost an aura of coolness in being a single mother. Then again, maybe I've got it all wrong. Maybe all those burly dudes pouring concrete and operating jackhammers all identify as mothers as opposed to fathers. Maybe they're all transgendered. I'll leave that as a rhetorical question for now. After all, I have no burning desire to ask burly Bruno brandishing a power tool if he's really a chick. After all, I don't own a hard hat myself. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, if you like that video and you want the Rebel to still keep calling it as it is, please visit standwiththerebel.com.
Hello, I am obsessed with the show Naked and Afraid, and that show teaches you everything you need to know about feminism. It also teaches you everything you need to know about the differences between men and women and the general problem with Western culture today. And Bill Whittle talks about this. He says that the solution to America's problems is to spend 3.5 days in the woods. And that would show us how hard it is to survive and how lucky we are to have everything we have. Naked and Afraid encapsulates this sort of arrogance we all have about how great we are. We have all these campaigns to promote our self-esteem, and our self-esteem is way too high, and women's self-esteem is way too high. They think they can do anything. They all think they're LeBron James. They kick ass, and there's no challenge they can't handle. And when I see this show, I see, oh no, actually, we're not that tough, we're not that great, and women aren't the same as men. Now, when you say this to people who haven't thought about it before, aka liberals, they say, oh, sexist pig, Western chauvinist asshole Gavin McInnes is a caveman who wants to hit women on the head with a club and drag them back to the cave because he says men capture big game and women nurture around the cave. That is generally the truth. Okay? Women do tend to those rules. And liberals, I want to explain something to you that's very basic that you don't seem to get. There's general and there's universal. Generally, men and women adapt to their biological roles. These are biological roles that we see in chimps too. Baby chimps like to play with trucks that are, when they're male, baby chimps that are female like to play with dolls. Generally, that is the same with male and female human beings. Universally, of course, there are exceptions. So just because you found a survivalist who kicked ass on Naked and Afraid doesn't destroy my point. In fact, one of my favorites was Alana Barfield. She was a Gucci salesperson who we all assumed was going to totally fail, and she kicked ass. She was amazing. However, a far more typical episode and a more representational depiction of the way men and women are would be Bo Stewart and Debbie Harris. I think this was on the 40 Days or Nothing episode, the XL one. They've got all kinds of different variations, and this one was different teams competing for 40 days. Now, the Bo Stewart and Debbie Harris team were awesome because she is so proud of herself before and after for surviving. Before, she was wearing a shirt that said, "I will thrive." And this guy is a U.S. Army Special Forces officer with teenagers. She's a mother of young children. What the hell are you doing going out there, lady? Why are you trying to prove this point? You have kids. You're risking diseases. You're risking death. Why are you going away from your kids for 40 days? When I'm away from my kids for 5 days, I feel like I'm getting chemotherapy. And I'm a dude. She's a mom. It's baffling, and it can't be the money. This is reality shows. They pay maybe $1,000 a month at best. They usually just pay the wages you're missing by being away from your job. Anyway, Bo Stewart's a totally different case. Special Forces officer, and I like the idea of him being out there. First of all, his kids are teenagers, so they're not going to miss him that much. Yes, he's taking a risk. The guy takes a risk every day. That's his job. He's an army brat. His dad risked his life every day. And I like seeing that kind of guy on TV because we're depicting soldiers wearing red high heels, and we're having women do push-ups as the Marines, and there's pictures of the Marines saying, "We are proud, Army strong," and it's some woman in a dress holding a clipboard. I prefer the Bo Stewart image of America's military out there. But here is a typical example of how that episode went.
It's just disgusting, but there's no other food option, so gotta take what you can get. You want them?
Go ahead. No, keep going until you start feeling better. Yeah. So.
Kind of tastes a little bit like coconut, but like oily.
What a Sir Thriver she is, huh? She dared to eat one of the many things he caught her. That whole episode was her saying thank you and sitting there in the cave as he went out and got food. He caught a caiman, a baby caiman. He caught big fish. They ate together. And they came back. She's all proud of herself. She's an inspiration. Her poor kids barely know her when she comes back. 40 days? And they both, he got leishmaniasis. He almost lost his ear to this disease. And they were getting bit by these sandflies that carry diseases. Why did she take that risk? What is she proving? Whatever she set out to prove as far as kick-ass, badass feminists go, she proved the opposite. She proved my point, that men and women have predetermined roles. Now, that was a typical episode, and I love that it encapsulates the reality that the narrative is pushing on us. The narrative is men and women are exactly the same, and women are badass. They can kick your head in, dude, and they shouldn't have kids. Why should a dude with tits have kids? There's no such thing as gender. The reality is Bo and Debbie. But the reason we let the narrative stray so far is because men in general, we love big game, we love big decisions, we love big picture thinking. We also don't like petty shit. So if you're gonna nag us and say, "I'm a woman, hear me roar," we just sort of go, yeah, okay, great. Now here is a very hyperbolic example of how Naked and Afraid sums up feminism. This is a woman who said, "I kick ass." The episode was Chris, Honora, and Luke. I presume it's not Honora. Chris, Honora, and Luke. And if you want to see feminism in a nutshell, in a perfect caveman representation, check out this clip.
You gonna go for it? You gonna make a wire?
I'm gonna lie here a little bit, and then I'm going to work on fishing.
Okay.
After 9 days of very little food or sleep, Honora, Chris, and Luke are running on empty.
Chris, do you think there's something wrong with me lying here for like 20 minutes and not like immediately getting on my fishing?
Fish at your own pace, girl.
Luke seems to have a problem with it.
I did not say that. I'm totally fine with it. You're saying I need to sit here 20 more minutes? That's fine.
I mean, if I sat here for 2 more hours then went fishing, would you have a problem with it?
I don't care what you do.
I mean, seriously, I have done so much, and I'm sorry if I need to do the same amount of work that you guys are doing all the time in order.
No one's saying that.
I'm trying to be a good teammate, you know?
I understand that, and that's totally fine.
I don't want to feel pressured, and also every time I have an idea, I feel like my ideas are all shot down.
Shortly after that, she kept pushing them until one of them goes, "Will you stop it with the whining?" And then she grabbed their most crucial tools, machete and a knife, and threw them in the river. When one of them went to get it, she said, "That's mine," and stole it back. This is what feminists are doing to Western society. They are just being brats. They're taking our tools, the tools we need to help them, and they're throwing them in the garbage and sabotaging the whole project. We have to be brave and not afraid and lay out the bare naked truth that feminism is not reality. The general truth is men and women are different.
Hi everyone. So I've been planning this video for a couple days. Sometimes when I feel like one video is more, quote, important, unquote, than the others, I kind of start formulating all these plans, but this isn't really a fancy channel, so inevitably it ends up being me at 9:39 on a, what is this, Sunday night in the Planet Fitness parking lot, recording a video before I go home. So I had actually seen the core article from this, which was actually from a Canadian newspaper's website, and lots of people shared it with me, and I was going to do it just based off of that. And then the killer is when Rich Johnston did this article where he mentioned the Canadian store, but also Legacy Comics out of Laredo, Texas. I've been to Legacy many times when I used to visit a buddy down on the border, and it was a really great shop. I actually had 2 signings there, I think. Great people, great community, great shop. And we don't get any information about why Legacy died, but I'm pretty sure it's the same reason as the Canadian store. So just an aside on Rich Johnston, I've actually had problems with him for years, but I kind of buried the hatchet when he did me a solid. He was actually the first person to warn me that I was about to get doxxed back when Susan Auger and then Heather Ontost helped participate in it. He actually gave me a heads up. He's like, hey, someone's trying to help me to get you to dox, to help. They're trying to get me to dox you, but I don't dox you. I don't dox people. So I told, I'm giving you a warning, heads up. I really appreciate that one. Anyway, the story, and I'm going to put the link to Rich's story. The link will be in the description. And this story really bothers me, especially in light of the interactions I've had with Marvel quote-unquote professionals. These people are not just killing a company filled with characters they didn't create, but they are putting proprietors out of business. Now, I first noticed this about 2 years ago when I lived in the Bay Area, and a store that has survived 2 or 3 recessions, the comic industry collapsing about twice over 3 or 4 decades, died. And the reason I believe it died is the thing that used to stare me in the face every week when I would come into the store. And this was this thing called the Wall of Diversity. Now, I've seen the Wall of Diversity in many stores. I used to see it more about 2 and 3 years ago. I don't see it as much. The Wall of Diversity is when you would come into a store, and the first thing you would see was a kind of an awkwardly placed stand right there, right in front. And it had a bunch of virtue signal bait trash comics that nobody actually buys, but that get a lot of press in the mainstream press and in the comics press. Stuff like Princeless by Jeremy Whitley, which freaking nobody bought, but got Jeremy Whitley several gigs at Marvel. A shaved side of the head, a princess who doesn't want a prince. Boy, there's been like 5 different books with that theme. Just endless identity politics grievance. Paper-thin characters, no pun intended, who are only their surface traits. And tons and tons of unsold SJW Marvel trash. The deal with comic stores is when they buy something, they're not like bookstores or newsstands. They don't get to return unsold product for a refund or a credit. The grocery store has Cosmopolitan magazine at every stand. At the end of the month they have 60 copies unsold. Well, they basically get credited for the future. So it's no harm, no foul for them to overstock. When comic stores overstock, they die. Or if they don't have enough just good books, they die. There's something, it's a really basic business concept called overhead. Overhead is your rent and the water bill and the electricity. And if you're in a strip mall, you got to chip in fees for the strip mall that pays for the security guard. And to get overhead, you need a steady income. And I've brought this up many times, and I'm going to repeat this forever until it becomes a mantra. The health of Marvel is the health of the industry. A sick Marvel is a sick industry. It's the whole Fisher King / King Arthur and Excalibur myth. But it's writ large in reality, and we see this. I mentioned going to a really great store in Ashburn, Virginia a couple weeks ago, and I was heartbroken and appalled. Although you got to put it this way, it's a good store, but proprietors got to be smart. I'm noticing at the stores that I've been going to lately, that Marvel books are either very thick or very thin on the shelves. They're either overselling, hoping that something will finally catch on and they'll have a big month, or they are ordering pinpoint accuracy 1 or 2 issues, and not even every book that Marvel puts out. I've been hunting Iceman and Squirrel Girl. I can't find it anywhere. It didn't sell out. These stores just don't even order it. But the proprietor of the I believe it's in Calgary. Supposedly it's either the oldest or the second oldest comic shop. He puts it just square on Marvel, and he says the things that I've been saying for months, that Marvel is flooding the shelves. He's like, people find out about Deadpool from the movie. He goes, we got 4 Deadpool books, but we don't have 1 good Deadpool book. They're just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. So Deadpool, they basically handed off to these like middle-aged, low-T nothings like Fred Van Lente and Jerry Dugan, guys who turn in the scripts on time. The books suck. That's why I was so shocked when the Deadpool movie was good. Because the Deadpool books are awful. Every once in a while, one will be okay, and people will way overpraise it, but it's trash. But he said, he's talking about, overextending and wearing out the welcome. 4 bad to mediocre books instead of 1 good one. And then the other thing is the whole SJW Marvel. He goes, I got people that are coming out of the theaters. They just saw Logan. They just saw Spider-Man Homecoming. They just saw Batman, Iron Man, Hulk, and the Avengers. And what do I show them? Riri Williams, and I guess explain who she is for 5 minutes. Freaking Gogurt Hulk. A female Thor with black lipstick who's dying of cancer, but not really. It's awful. It literally is. It's a design to fail. So one of the things people have been hitting me up because they noticed that Heather, the Doxer Antos, she just keeps failing upward. She's getting more. She's really becoming not just a figurehead. And we were talking. They're like, "Oh, do you think you're going to get rid of her?" I go, "No. They're riding this out because it does feel like this is almost the end of days at Marvel. They're not doing anything built around still being here in 10 years. It's all short money. I think this is one of the first videos I ever made where I said SJW Marvel is built around the short money. Secret Empire, what are we coming on? 29 years of collecting comics, is the biggest failure, flop, embarrassment I have ever seen. We are talking little to no enthusiasm. Books literally 2 to 3 inches thick. Does anyone even know how many books related to? I think they're on issue 9 of the main Secret Empire. But every time I go to the comic store, there's some other side quest, 4-issue, whatever. Nobody even knows. They're just flooding it out there. I get emails from proprietors, or people go to stores. They go, my proprietors can't even keep it straight. Marvel is killing stores. Killing them dead, putting them out of business, and nothing's going to replace that. You take out Legacy Comics. The last time I was in Laredo a couple years ago, it was the only comic store in town. Now, if you want to live in Laredo, which is actually kind of a boom town, that's what's so pathetic about it. Laredo is not some dying border town. The whole border is flourishing. You go to places like McAllen and Laredo, Texas, half the buildings in the town are less than 10 years old. There's tons of traffic coming in from the international border and trade, all that type of stuff. People have money, but they don't like your stupid characters. I mean, Marvel characters are very, very popular. You go down to border town like Laredo, everyone's got a Captain America t-shirt. Everyone's got an Iron Man, Spider-Man. Then they go into the comic shop, and what do they see? Even Miles Morales, who people have convinced me he's an okay character. It's not something you can convince people. Like, they reject it automatically. Normal people don't like these race swaps. They don't like these gender swaps. They don't like age swaps. They don't like anything. They come out of Spider-Man Homecoming. They go to the comic store. What do they get? Miles Morales, a bland, humorless, not really SJW character, but he's not that interesting. In a costume they don't even recognize. Or then they flip through Spectacular Spider-Man, where he's a pseudo-bi jagoff in a relationship with Human Torch. Like, come on. And you can say this is kind of funny, tongue-in-cheek, but I take this pretty seriously, like very seriously. I mean, it's killing an industry. I actually, when I was talking to I almost said a fellow pro. I'm not really a pro. When I was talking to a pro who was also considering legal action a couple weeks ago with the doxing and all these fake, defamatory accusations they just throw out because they feel that it'll never come back on them. I mentioned talking to someone who I was contacted by someone who works in law enforcement, and they said, "Do you want to pursue this?" And I thought about it, and I eventually decided not to. But one thing I was thinking about is I remember I went to go try out for the Border Patrol, and I took like some test, and then I watched a video, and they made the point that the Border Patrol is not just to protect the border and the nation; it's also to protect the economy. And that we have people in Marvel, they are literally destroying an industry. They're killing an industry because of their weirdo, corrupt, far left extremist politics. That's it. I've got what I consider to be my lead insider at Marvel. He's talked about, Marvel is a bad job that leads to good jobs. So one of the reasons these people can fail and fail and fail and fail is because they have the success of Marvel Studios. Very few people, a micro percentage of the population, truly understands the difference between Marvel Comics and Marvel Studios. It's all one big success party as far as they're concerned. So people leave Marvel, and you always go to a better job after you leave Marvel, at least better paying, because everyone has a positive view. Oh, Marvel, I saw the Avengers, I saw, Ant-Man, oh, wow, that's great. Freaking flagship selling freaking 18,000 characters, or 18,000 copies and falling every month. But anyone who has Marvel on their resume will be seen as a success. So you have a bunch of creeps, and I'll call them flat out sociopaths. The weirdest thing, like I brought this up many times. If you have 3 absolute dirtbags in a battalion of about 800 people, all in different companies, which means they're all in different platoons also, they somehow all find each other. Marvel, over the last 10 years, social media has allowed them to cull and only pick, for the most part, quote, fellow travelers, unquote. Far left extremist ideologues who put politics above sales and entertainment, and people who absolutely loathe the fans. It's funny, Captain Cummings did a video where he's, he says, hey, Dan Slott's Silver Surfer is good. And I reviewed Dan Slott's, Amazing Spider-Man. I was like, this is a good book. He's blocked us both, of course. He doesn't talk about his books. Barely ever. It is about 90% politics. And then, there was tons of people, including me, who didn't even notice Silver Surfer was still being published when it was canceled. My local stores didn't even carry 1 copy on the stands. So it's really pretty serious. You can say 1 or 2 stores are going out of business, but Legacy going out of business, that basically takes out the whole Rio Grande Valley, except for a couple. I think there's 2 stores in the McAllen. There's McAllen and Mission. There's a really, really good store in McAllen called Myth. I think it's officially called Myth Adventures, but the sign and everyone in town just calls it Myth. Great store. It's basically like a classic 1990s store with a whole bunch of back issues, like half, maybe like a quarter of the store is back issues. But you don't understand. Like Legacy that just took out the only comic store within like a 50-mile radius. You want to talk about square mileage? Just for a couple hundred square miles that are just of people, a couple 100,000 people that don't have a single comic book store to go to. I don't know what the situation as Calgary is, but it's truly disgusting. This is people actively participating in the either the destruction or the severe wounding of an American industry. Not just an American industry, an American created medium. Comic books is an American art form. Superheroes is an American genre that, of course, is spread across the world, but it originated here in America. It's, East Coast Jewish culture that was propagated throughout the world, and now in the same city where it was created, it's being destroyed. So I like to be funny a lot in my videos, but this is a pretty serious deal. It's a very ugly situation. And so tell me what you think about this video. Tell me if you've gone to either one of the stores that are being closed. Tell me about stores that are closing in your area. I know one of the two stores here in Lynchburg is closing. The one that I would consider to be a real comic book store. The other one is, sadly but rather smartly, transitioned to more of a toy and memorabilia store with just, geez, like their comic section is not even 5% of their square footage in there. You can easily miss it. But the other store, which is a really good comic store and has been here I think for almost 30 years, it's going out of business. And, I was talking to the proprietor. He's like, I just can't sell this stuff, So tell me what you think. Tell me about stores that have closed. I especially love to hear from comic store owners. So my email's on the About page. Subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. Notification Squad, your boy. Check out the Patreon. I'm sharing the stuff on Twitter. I'm getting some pretty hot takes. It's funny. I asked for hot takes and meanness for my Jawbreakers, but I actually didn't ask people to dial it down for the Iron Man. I did these Iron Man features. People were salty. I'm coloring it. I wanted to see if I could color it. It's supposed to be like an 80s style comic book. So I was like, well, 80s coloring was pretty simple, but yeah, people just aren't really digging it that much. I'm just gonna, try to make it better. I'm listening to people, taking their advice. Probably go through a couple of iterations and I'll form it into PDF. I'll do a video about that. Put up a link just like I did. I'm gonna keep the size of the PDF down. The PDF on Jawbreakers is way too big. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll have more videos up tomorrow. Hi everyone, it's your boy, Zach. Just back from being highly disappointed that I witnessed a peaceful protest. I was trying to do my laundry, but there's too many people there because it was closed over the holiday weekend. So I was heading home, and then I saw that there was some supposedly huge protest against Trump Tower. So I sped walk like 15 blocks over, and by the time I got there, it was just like nothing. It was like 50 people. It was like almost as many cops as there was people. It was no big deal. I was really disappointed in this peaceful demonstration. No, it's fine. But I like to go to these type of events. I've been going to them for years. Anytime I hear about some kind of thing that's going to be on the news, or I think will be on the news, I go to check it out. One of the things I've consistently found over the years is that the sizes of the crowds are vastly overestimated or underestimated to make political points by our incredibly, almost completely biased media. Anyway, I already had this video planned, but it kind of tied into that because it was a protest against the rescindment of DACA, which is the Dreamers Act, which means like if your family came here illegally, but you were a kid and now you're an adult and you have a job, you can stay while you work out your immigration paperwork, as long as you keep filling out the Dreamer paperwork, and then you pay a fee, I think like every 2 years. I had to look all that stuff up because whenever you go to any protest, it's the same. Like if you don't know what the protest is about, you can't tell from the protest you're at. You always have to ask, like, what is this about? Like, they all say the same stuff. They're always talking about, like, the KKK. Like every protest I've ever been at, they bring up the KKK. Even just random stuff. It's like, what is this, like 1920? Anyway, so the other day, a couple people sent me these screenshots of Gail Simone. I think she was talking about DACA. It was before the decision was made today. And I've heard this a million times. I've heard that Superman is an illegal alien. So was Wonder Woman when she first came here. I know the DC continuity mythology has been rebooted half a dozen times, but just to reiterate, Superman would never have been considered an illegal alien. We have borders on the land and on the sea. We don't have any borders in the sky. There's no actual legal precedent to make it illegal to land as a child from another planet and be adopted very quickly. There's been different versions of how the Kents faked it so that people think that Clark is their son, but it would be completely solid legal grounds. Wonder Woman came as a ambassador in most of the versions of the mythology, which is again completely legal. But the other one, which is a big one that always gets brought up, is that superheroes are social justice warriors because they fight for social justice. And the ways this is proven are usually by exceptions, including incredibly rare exceptions. Literally mentioning one or two stories from like 1940, and that's the proof. You know, as the cliche goes, the exception does not prove the rule. Occam's razor things tend to be pretty simple. Superheroes are crime fighters. That's what they are. They're not social justice warriors. First of all, the actual term social justice warrior is not just sarcastic, but almost doubly sarcastic. The point is that these people are not accomplishing anything. This is all just virtue signaling to pat their own ego and make themselves look good, to the world. H3H3, their latest video is about some random woman in the BBC. I don't know if she wrote the story or I don't know. I do not understand why Brits and people in the UK put up with the BBC. It is so much propaganda, and they have to pay for it. There was actually something vaguely similar when I lived in Germany, where you have to pay for the local TV, the free TV. It's actually a tax, and they actually drive around in these vans, and they can tell because people will just say, "Oh, I don't watch TV," and then they'll have these little aerials seeing if you're picking up a signal, and then they'll literally knock on your door. So that happened to me, and I was like, yeah, I don't speak German, which they actually took as a legitimate reason to not get charged. But I used to watch it all the time because after 10, it was all just boobs on every single channel. Anyway, getting back to the BBC, they put out this thing called digital blackface, and it was literally saying that sharing emojis or gifs with black people was the same as blackface. So this is the perfect example of a social justice warrior. It is someone picking up something that is a trifle at best and then tackling it head on as if they were doing anything. This is it would be akin to not just a superhero picking up litter or stopping litterers, but it would be akin to a superhero finding someone who just walked out of McDonald's with a bag of food and then threatened them. It's like, you better not let her, I'm gonna punch you. Superheroes aren't social justice warriors. They're crime fighters. Almost all of them. Even people like the X-Men, they're just a strike force that just goes and they just fight people committing crimes. These are international crimes, or sometimes they defend attack from another planet, but they're crime fighters. It's the simplest thing in the world. Now, the people who are saying they're social justice warriors are people who are trying to do the classic social justice game, the kind of the same thing that Antifa and Black Lives Matter does, where they emotionally blackmail you into agreeing, or emotionally blackmail you into feeling that you can't argue against them. So one of people have brought up. A lot of people don't like Black Lives Matter, and most of it has to do with their name, because what they do is they literally, it's like when I said about, God, what book was that? Motor Crush, where I imagined it was going to be bad, and then it was much worse. The first time I heard Black Lives Matter, I go, oh geez, I know what they're going to do. The first time you ever disagree with one of the 6 points of things in their manifesto, they'll say, oh, really? Black lives don't matter? And they literally do that. It's hilarious. Antifa, there's a bunch of naive simpletons and also very disingenuous people. Antifa stands for anti-fascist, which is very ironic because Antifa are fascists. They are literally, they show up to every free speech event, and they come with weapons. Actually, Antifa is very savvy. That's why I feel like they're all kind of like rich kids, or rich people's kids, because Antifa is they're kind of smarter than your average violent gang, which they're a violent gang. Is they don't go to a protest with a baseball bat. They go to a protest with a sign holder, a very heavy stick that is way more load bearing than is required for the poster board that's attached to it. The point is, when things go bad, they will hit someone with their sign holder, and then it can't be said to be a weapon when they're in court. They also do things like use mace, which mace is legal frickin' everywhere. Even the most liberal cities with the biggest weapons laws, they let you take mace literally everywhere except for like inside federal buildings. So they're very savvy about how they commit violence. And there's, I can't name or know of a single Antifa event that didn't have violence. They go there to commit violence. That's why they carry weapons. That's why they have masks. They go there to commit crimes, to commit violence. That's why they're famous for smashing someone in the head with bike locks. Again, something legal. It's not illegal to carry a bike lock, which is weird because who carries a bike lock? Like the bike lock's either going to be locking the bike or it's going to be on the bike while you're traveling with the bike. Like literally, that should be classified as a weapon because there's no reason to just be carrying a bike lock. But the people who say superheroes are social justice warriors are the people like Antifa, who they'll call themselves anti-fascist. So whatever they do, they're like, well, we are fighting fascists. No, you are fighting a guy who doesn't agree with you, and you just call everyone a fascist. That's why people don't like Black Lives Matter, because anytime you ever agree with them, they just say, oh, Black lives don't matter. So anytime someone says superheroes are social justice warriors, either they're so simple-minded they don't realize that term is a sarcastic put-down, or they are trying to emotionally blackmail you into agreeing with something or silencing yourself to not argue back. There have been onesies and twosies of superheroes doing kind of social justice-y things. Like there's a story from like 1940 where Superman took a war profiteer and he flew him to the crossfire zone in between two opposing forces. He's like, hey, how do you like war? That's almost kind of like more of like a womp womp, like Shaggy Dog story. Like, I wish you would just say something like, oh, I don't like it. And then it's like, Superman's just like, oh yeah, I guess I should have foreseen that answer. Yeah, so that's one of those ones that it crops up. It actually crops up all the time, and it's one of those things where it's a perennial. Another perennial. Should I segue into another topic with 11 minutes in? This might be related. I'm just going to throw this one in. So Heather Ontos, my doxer, the person who said a father of a Muslim daughter, a Jewish daughter, and a Hispanic son, was a supporter of the KKK. I did several videos that I'm sure she got to, basically telling her, shut your lips or we're going to meet each other in civil court. She's now doing this thing that is straight out of the Anita Sarkeesian playbook, in which every week or two she will elliptically refer, with no proof, with no screenshots, with no links, with no descriptions that have any detail in them, about someone harassing her, attacking her, threatening her. If anyone follows Gamergate, and I'm kind of like a filthy casual with Gamergate, I'm not really into video games, I just kind of barely knew about this, but I picked up on the scam artist that Anita Sarkeesian was right away. Heather Ontos is not as bad because I don't think she's as smart or as cunning as Anita Sarkeesian, but she has picked up on what will benefit her. This thing about kind of doing blind items about, oh, these so-and-so. So Captain Cummings is pretty sure she's referring to me and him, because we're the main ones who do videos. One thing about YouTube and videos is comic creators, especially these far-left extremists, or I'll just call them extremists, they were able to, over 10 years, get every comic book forum, get Twitter, get every website where people talk about comics, and they could no platform you very quickly. Buddy with the mods, etc., etc. YouTube doesn't really have mods, so as long as you follow the terms of service and are kind of savvy with the changing rhythms of the algorithm, I didn't mean to do that. The vagaries and inconsistency of the algorithm, you're pretty much golden. Like, you might get your shekels nerfed, but your shekels will get nerfed when everyone else's shekels get nerfed. One of the things about algorithms is you tweak them. They go live and then they stop too many things, so then you tweak them so they let some things through. Right now, the shekels and the views are good. For a while, it was bad for everyone, like about 3 weeks ago or so. Things are back good. But one of the things that these extremists who have taken over and are basically choking comics to death is they want to no platform opposing points of view. And they have found themselves unable to do it thus far in what I'll call comics YouTube. Me and Captain Cummings, we're still out there. Everyone who roasts, we're still out there. We're still doing fine. We're gaining more views. We're gaining more subscribers. We're getting more shekels. Things are going good. So they're going to keep doing this thing where they elliptically ask, or elliptically make accusations, hoping that you'll make the connection. Oh, they must be referring to Diversity in Comics. They must be referring to Captain Cummings. They're not referring to anything. As we discussed before, the milkshake incident was a manufactured event. It was manufactured to distract from crushingly low, disappointing sales at Marvel. It was a non-event where there were no actual attacks. Out of 500 comments, there were like 3 to 5 mildly salty comments. One of them was mine. And there's really been nothing besides that. Heather Ontos is now effectively unfireable. Captain Cummings made this prediction first. She'll be made a full editor by next year. No way this is not happening. And the rest of the milkshake crew is basically unfireable as well. Even though sales are plummeting at Marvel, all their events are basically DOA. When they even bother to remember that they're doing them, like Venomverse. Venomverse is like the only good event they've done all year, and they seem to think it's already over. It hasn't even really officially started. But anyway, okay, so this is kind of a weird video. I kind of just squeezed in a bunch of grab bag of things I was thinking about while I was walking around Midtown Manhattan. But anyway, tell me what you think about the things I've talked about in this video. Do you think Superman is an illegal alien? Do you think superheroes are social justice warriors? Do you think when you see these blind items where people make vague accusations, do you take them at face value, or do you notice, like, hey, it's not the 1800s, why can't you do a screenshot? If one of her famous accusations is somebody said something in DM. Well, that would be the easiest thing in the world to screenshot, and it's also very easy to protect your DMs where it's only people that you follow who can DM you. So Heather is lying or exaggerating for all of these things, and she's doing it as a way to cover up that she basically got her job because Jordan White thought she was cute. She is wholly unqualified. Her entire resume to get hired at supposedly the top company in the industry is editing one Kickstarter who Captain Cummings has reviewed and is seen to be a complete joke of a book. Absolutely horrible. Anyway, if you've gotten this far, I commend you. This is a very scattershot. This is almost like one of those, like, what do they call it? Odds and sods. Just random stuff I thought of. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. Check out the Patreon. It's going really well. That's going to help out launching the Diversity in Comics comic series that I plan on doing next year. Still going with that. And I'll have new comic reviews. I'm going to be at the comic shop at like 8:45 because comic shops open really early here in Midtown Manhattan, and so I'll have new comic reviews up tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.
In those days, it was so frowned upon.
Homophobia.
Yeah, there was a Mexican guy that was.
Say no more.
I believe he was a dreamer.
Guilty.
He was a dreamer.
My Coke dealer told me he was going to be on time today. I guess we're both dreamers.
Yeah, so we were hanging out at what was the ranch back then. I used to live in California, and horses and everything, and a lot of Mexicans.
What a great life.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Horses and Mexicans.
Horses and Mexicans, yes. And this guy came over. Everyone was drunk. My dad's there, all his friends, and I'm there, and I'm probably 14 years old or something. And this drunk Mexican guy goes, "Why don't me and you go over there into the bushes?"
Do a perfect Otto and George, a lousy Mexican.
Why
don't me and you go to the bushes?
Why don't we go into the bushes? Big fucking Frito Bandito mustache.
Frijoles, I count frijoles.
He wanted me to go, and my dad heard that.
Right. Oh, no.
Oh, my God. My dad grabbed this fucking guy, put him on the hood of one of the pickup trucks, and just fucked him in the ass. No, teasing, of course.
What a dreamer.
Yeah. He beat the shit out of him. And all the other Mexicans were like,
I would.
Joey, don't. What are you doing? That's another Mexican.
That's a good guy.
Yeah. And then
do multiple Mexicans better.
They do. Different types.
But I would do that if you were my kid.
Yeah. That was just it. And, I was like, fucking, I was horrified.
Yeah.
My dad got mad at me for fucking,
Because wearing something
he's like, why are you wearing that sexy dress?
That dress smells like beans.
Fucking fag. I had like a giant afro back.
I love
then.
that.
And my dad hated that just for the fact that one, it was like long hair, so I thought I was a faggot.
But it wasn't the long hair like the Led Zeppelin had.
Oh no! Who didn't want the long Led Zeppelin hair?
And you look like Dwayne on What's Happening.
Boom Boom Washington.
That's the better reference.
Oh, it was terrible. Unless you really want to go obscure and go with Room 222.
I know it.
Of course, that guy with the fucking afro. But it was he hated that because the fag aspect and then the black aspect.
Right. Okay.
We went to Disneyland.
That is two bad ones.
Yeah.
Italian guy.
To Disneyland, I had the big afro, and we go to get on one of the rides, and a black girl is running the ride, and she goes, "Honey, your natural's bigger than mine." and if my dad could have fucking hit me right there.
First of all, there was a white guy supervising, I hope.
Oh, I hope so. The ride was safe, so I assume there was.
You're tall enough to get on the ride with the afro.
Yeah. The afro made it so I could get on the ride. Oh, we will go into a small world. My father's cursing all the little brown dolls.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, look at these fucking. What would they do without these dolls?
Well, that's racism.
That's real old school racism.
I'll tell you, the worst episode, most unbelievable episode of Happy Days is when Fonzie doesn't let all the white kids go to a party. Wants all the white kids to go to a party just because the black kid is playing.
Black kid.
So Fonzie,
Sticks.
Italian, 1955 hood, who didn't graduate from high school, is also a black activist.
Yes, in the 50s.
Hey,
Yeah.
my buddy's an African American. And you're going to the party. Yeah. Forget about the Italian stereotypes, or I'm going to beat you up.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause that's how we settle stuff.
I never saw him lay his hand on one fucking person the whole show. At least beat someone up.
My buddy's a homosexual. And I'm down with that. If you're not down with black homosexuals, you ain't down with Fonzie. You're going to that party, Richie. You scumbag.
Cunningham, suck my dick.
It's like in Milwaukee, 1955. The Dodgers barely had a black guy playing second. Fonzie's, oh, you racists.
Mouth, when the Ugenti twins are done, hop on my fucking cock.
Ugenti twins. I'm into interracial dating. Okay? If I have a daughter, she better date a black guy. Because I'm the Fonz. The Fonz is down with interracial dating. And if you ain't with the Fonz.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The black
Yeah.
kid who plays drums is best friends with the Italian hood. Who can hit the jukebox and play any song by the Shirelles.
I think he'd be okay with the black dude that plays the drums hitting on one of his chicks.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. What, African Americans can't have an Italian chick? If my mother dated Styx, I'd be fine with it. Because my mother is Italian American, Styx is African American, and what's the common theme here? American.
There you go. Woo, and the crowd goes
Thank
crazy.
you. All right. Woo! Now, Richie, blow me. Sometimes I sweat like Louis Anderson. Okay, Anthony, we're ready for you.
I like turning tragedy to comedy. Do ya? My father used to hit me with whiskey bottles. Oh,
Hey, he's fat. He's a fat American. Cut this fucking guy a break. I could get fat.
Fonzie is so tolerant.
He's tolerant Fonzie.
That's amazing.
It's my favorite character.
would
You
have
came up
thought
with a tolerant Fonzie.
50s.
Yeah, a
Greaser biker guy.
You think he has cousins who feel the same way?
I don't even think fucking Chachi feels the same way.
Chachi hates him.
Chachi dropping N-bombs all day. Fonzie,
yeah.
hey!
Did you just say the N-bomb? I bet I bomb your face with my Italian fist. Because Italians hit people.
Yeah, unless they're African American.
Yeah, well, not them.
Half in the bag. Well, Jay, after just watching Hansel and Gretel and Jack the Giant Slayer, let's talk a little bit about where movies come from. There's two types of movies. One is an original idea, and two is a ripoff of that idea.
Oh, original ideas. I remember those.
It seems ages ago. Well, there's movies that come out, and we'll call them watershed movies. They're usually movies that make a ton of money. They're usually an original idea, and everyone wants to make a movie just like it. Some movies like this, for example, would be like Star Wars, Pulp Fiction, The Matrix, which started off a craze of hip action movies with bullet time and speed up, slow down kind of stuff.
The Blair Witch Project, that's kind of started found footage movies, which is still going.
A more recent example would be the Harry Potter movies. Obviously, the first Harry Potter movie was a huge success, and that was based on a series of books aimed at young adults. They were sort of fantasy books. So that began the Hollywood orgy of what do we got? Let's look for books that young adults read that we could make Harry Potter-esque movies out of.
Yeah, especially looking for ones that were already a series of books, because then you can make more movies.
Yeah, so one of the big ones that they started off with was the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is, of course, the C.S. Lewis novels. And I think there was a sequel called The Golden Compass. But there certainly were a lot of other Harry Potter knockoff movies.
What might those be?
Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events.
Nanny McPhee.
Aragon.
Bridge to Terabithera.
Inkheart.
What?
What?
The Spiderwick Chronicles. Percy Jackson and the Olympians. The Lightning Thief. What?
So those are all good, clear-cut examples of movies that came out based on the success of Harry Potter. Can very easily be traced back to that movie.
Yes.
But now, after a period of zombie movies and superhero movies, the current trend in Hollywood seems to be making darker versions of fairy tales and big dumb action movies based on classic literature or just on title recognition alone.
Yeah.
So, Jay, where do all these goddamn fairy tale and action movies come from?